folks. True story, on the way here, I stopped. I went through the McDonald's drive-thru, had a quarter pounder with cheese meal, got up to the window, and they told me at the window, $8 and change, right? I got up there, and she hands me my receipt, and she says, the car in front of you paid for you. So you know what I said? I said, well, that's great. What kind of a jerk would I be if I didn't pay for the car behind me? So it was two 20-year-olds. They each had double quarter pounder with cheese meals and shakes. Shakes are an upcharge over Cokes. Do with that information what you wish. I'm sincerely delighted to see you here this evening. We're going to start with prayer. Keith's going to pray for us. Keith just found out he's going to pray.
I did. I hope my voice holds up. Heavenly Father, we thank you that we're able to gather this evening, and I just pray that we'll feel your presence here. I pray that you be with the gentleman from Eagle Brook, and I just pray that we'll have a really good meeting, and I just pray that we'll feel your spirit tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. We're going to start with a level set, and then we're going to go into the listening session, okay? So I want to start with whether you were here or not a week ago Sunday during the quarterly business meeting. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of what we discussed. So we discussed the fact that how we arrived at tonight, we as a board have been looking at for over a year. In fact, we started it a year ago, September, exploring what the future of our church is. And in hindsight, we realized pretty quickly we've been looking at this for 15 years, big picture, as we've been looking at future church planning, etc. So this wasn't something that happened really quickly. It's been in the works for quite some time from a Board of Stewards standpoint. I shared with you that we looked at a variety of options from a transition standpoint, and though God didn't give us that lightning bolt, yes, boom, do this, read these 2 tablets. We didn't get that. But what we did get was we got a series of no's. We would explore an option, and we would get a no. And we would explore an option, and we would get a no. And every time we took a step in regards to the Eagle Brook option, we got a yes, and a yes, and a yes. And so here we are tonight. And so we're pursuing the option. We're looking at the option of what it would look like. I didn't coin this phrase. I don't know who did. But if we were to be adopted by Eagle Brook, what if we became an Eagle Brook? What would that look like? So I shared with you that nothing was certain yet. In fact, we have several steps to take. Number 1 is to have listening sessions. And this is the first one tonight. So we've got friends from Eagle Brook here tonight. They have things to share with us, and then they're going to entertain your questions and your comments. All right? And we're going to have as many listening sessions as we need. We have one tonight. We have one scheduled for this Thursday at 10 o'clock. All right? Future ones will be scheduled. So please be aware of that. And they'll be scheduled relatively quickly as needed. And then eventually, once we have run the gamut of listening sessions, we will have a congregational vote, where you, the membership, will have the opportunity to vote on what the board will propose to you. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's how we got here tonight. I want to share with you that we are recording this tonight. We're not live streaming it. We are recording it. And then we'll post it to the church's YouTube site if you want to look at it again and again and review it. If you know folks that aren't here or won't be able to attend one of these, you can tell them that it's available for them to view. All right? So please be aware we're being recorded. So we have, you're Dan Munson. I know you. We have 3 representatives from Eagle Brook. I will let 2 of them introduce themselves. So we're going to start with Tyler Gregory. Tyler, are you first? Tyler, come on up. Tyler Gregory is the executive pastor at Eagle Brook, and we're going to turn this over to him.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. My name is Tyler. I brought 2 of my really good friends that I get to work with all the time. I'm going to let them introduce themselves as well. But we're just honored to be here, honestly. And Ross said it well. As a church, this has happened over the last few years as we've grown. We've had churches approach us, and we've had conversations like this. And sometimes doors open, and sometimes God shuts those doors. And honestly, we have that same approach, that we're going to continue taking steps until God makes it clear that this isn't the step he wants to take. So that really is our approach here too. We're going to dive in and share just some brief things with you, and then we do really want to get to know you and hear your questions too. But let us just introduce ourselves a little bit. Sorry, we can't. It would take forever to go around and have you introduce all of yourself, but hopefully we can get to know you. But once again, I'm Tyler Gregory, executive pastor at Eagle Brook. I've been on staff at Eagle Brook for 18 years. My wife and I have been attending for 22, right out of Bethel. We were looking for a church to attend. Somebody told us about this church over in White Bear Lake called Eagle Brook, and we went and haven't missed many weekends since. Let me just say it that way. And so have 2 kids. My daughter is almost 13 in 2 weeks, and she's doing great so far. She's not acting like a 13-year-old yet, so that's good. And then we have a son who's almost 10 as well. And so we live up in Hugo, pretty close to our White Bear location. So that's me. I've been in my role as executive pastor for 6 years, been a variety of different roles at Eagle Brook, been part of our leadership team for about 16 years. And here's my friend Dale.
Hi there, I'm Dale Peterson. Been at Eagle Brook attending for almost 28 years. I used to work at Bethel University. I was in the student life department, running the housing program, so I was an associate dean there. And it was 22 years ago that our senior pastor tapped me on the shoulder and he said, Dale, I know you have 4 kids, so I have 4, you just have 2. I have 4 kids and you get that tuition break. But what if you walked away from it and just came and helped us here at Eagle Brook Church? And I knew it was a call from God to do that. So I left my career at Bethel University, and now for 22 years I've been on the leadership team at Eagle Brook. Currently, I'm the executive director of the Eagle Brook Association. And so I just have this great privilege of working with pastors and churches outside of Eagle Brook. So all denominations, how can we help other churches reach more people for Christ? And that has gone from a local ministry to national and now international. We're helping churches all over the world. Is that it? Yeah, well, I got other stuff to tell you, but later. Yeah,
Was that coming?
that's coming.
We don't want to get to the really good stuff right out of the gate. Yeah, so no, that's good. Thank you, Dale and Tyler. Jim Johnson, I've been on staff now about 4.5 years at Eagle Brook. Not all of our staff comes out of higher ed, but I was at Northwestern before that for 13 years, and my good friend on my far right, Tyler, did some heavy convincing along with Jesus and nudging me and saying, this is where you really should come and be a part of our team. And we prayed about it and took the leap of faith and no turning back. It's been such a privilege and an honor to serve. As well as I would say being here tonight is really an honor for the 3 of us to be here. Even if nothing develops out of this, other than having a conversation with you all, and for, as you'll hear throughout the night, we have special connections with this place. I can't tell you how many times I've been in this room, maybe because Tracy and her mom Karen were singing and my mom said, you need to be there so you hear that special music because it's going to be that good, or being here for a wedding or those kind of things, and even making the connection as I'm walking in tonight to Dr. Harley, who came and spoke in my classes at Bethel Seminary, and the writings, I mean, honestly, were so transformational for my own marriage of 28 years and those kind of things. And then to also walk in the door and see, because God called me out of Bethel Sem to be at a small little town at a Converge church up in Mora, Minnesota, and to see 2 familiar faces here tonight that are from that area. And so it's just really, really an honor for being in this space. Dick and Karen, I just have to give you a quick shout out. Beyond my parents, I don't know that there's a couple that's been more instrumental in my life than you all. And so thank you so much for that. So that's enough about me, other than I'll say this, I have an amazing wife, 2 daughters who are both in college. And I get the privilege of overseeing what we would say is our development and generosity areas at Eagle Brook.
I was telling Ross this earlier. Jim knows everyone. It's crazy. And hopefully it was Jesus more than me that was nudging him to take whatever step he was taking. But hey, we just want to share a little bit. Ross and the board has asked us to talk about who we are as a church. And we just want to give you a little glimpse, and then hopefully through other questions that you have, you can hear our heart on some of these things too. But I'm just going to share just a couple minutes and then hand it off to Dale here, and he'll continue. But this is something a lot of people don't know, is that Eagle Brook is actually a church that is 74 years old. And so Eagle Brook started in 1948 in White Bear Lake in someone's home. It was a church plant coming out of St. Paul, and in 1948, a lot of people were moving up to White Bear Lake, which used to be the cabin area because it was way up north, and people started to move out, and the suburbs kept moving out, and so there started to be more people. And this church just had a heart to say, how do we reach these people? And so from the very beginning, there was 19 people off of Highway 96 in a home, and after the first meeting, the story goes that there was too many people, that the small little house couldn't fit these people, and so they started meeting in the White Bear Armory and the theater, and they went into the Lutheran church eventually when the Lutheran church moved around for many years until 1972, and the group had raised enough money to finally build a permanent facility on Buffalo Street and Highway 61, which is where our White Bear Lake location is right now. And so there was about 300 people or so at the time in 1972, and lots of different pastors through those years. Our senior pastor, Bob Merritt, who was our senior pastor for about 29 years, came in 1991. They were looking for who the next senior pastor is going to be, and they went through the whole process with the board, and they found this little bald guy who he calls himself the little bald guy, so I think I can say that. Found his way to White Bear Lake. He had grown up in the cities here, actually grew up out in Pennsylvania, went to Bethel, was a youth pastor down in St. Paul, went off and got his PhD and came back and just really felt like God was calling him to be a pastor. And so he started 1991 in White Bear Lake. And one of the things he told the board at the time is he said, I would love to be here, but don't hire me unless you really want to reach people who are far from God. He just had this heart of, the church is not only for the people who are in the building, but what about all those people out there who need to be in a relationship with Jesus? And apparently the board seemed to think that was a good idea and liked his enthusiasm as a young guy at the time. And so really for the next 28, 29 years, Bob helped lead our church in amazing ways. And he would tell you he's not that good. And he would tell you that it's really God's hand with the help of a lot of people, mostly volunteers, who helped grow that church. And so Bob was committed to really just sharing the gospel with people, to saying, you know what, here's the Jesus I know, and sharing God's truth with people. And the church started to grow. And by about the year 2000 or so, we had run out of room at the White Bear location. And we added on, much like here, we added onto the building several times over the years because people kept coming. And we're like, what do? We don't want to run out of room. We want to have a seat for everyone who wants to come. And I think at one time we were doing 7 services at the White Bear location, which was crazy, but also really hard. And so the question was, well, what do we do next? And once again, we were just committed to allowing anyone who wanted to encounter Jesus to do that. And so we didn't have more room to add on. And so the board really prayed about this for years and raised money for years and said, well, let's move the whole church to a different location. And that's what we did. Lino Lake, some of you maybe have been there. We built a location in the middle of a farm field in Lino Lakes, about 7 miles away. And the idea was we were going to move the whole church. So this weekend we're meeting in White Bear Lake. Next weekend, don't come here. Everyone go up to Lino Lakes, and people had sacrificed and given and volunteered. And when we opened that, God just blew open the doors, and we saw thousands and thousands of people come. And honestly, our goal has never been to be a big church. Our goal is to reach people. And Dale's going to talk about that. And honestly, being a big church is really hard sometimes to lead. And Bob never wanted that, but he was passionate about just leading people to this salvation in Jesus Christ. And we were committed to that. And so it's like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing. And that has led to just crazy amounts of growth. And we've opened up other locations along the way, all shapes and sizes. We've opened up small locations. We've opened up large locations. And really, we've done that based on where people are coming from. And one of the things we've been passionate about over the years is looking at where are people driving from, and can we put a church closer to where they live? And here's the reason why, is if you love your church, and you all love your church, you're willing to drive a long way to come to church. You might be willing to drive a half hour. You might be willing to drive longer. And we had people doing that. But it's really tough to invite your neighbor to come to church with you if the drive is a half hour away. Hey, why don't you come to church and me? It's only a half hour up the road. And so that's been one of the things we've been committed to over the years, and it's kind of our vision going forward, is how do we just allow an opportunity? How do we open up locations so that more and more people can know Jesus and hear about him? And so that's really been the reason for our growth. We can get into that more as we go if you have questions. But I'm going to let Dale tell you a little bit more of the kind of the heart and soul of who we are.
Yeah, we have a lot in common. I started attending Trinity Baptist Church when I was 4 years old. I was born at Wheelock Parkway Baptist Church, remember that? And so when this building was built, Wheelock Parkway really made the decision to let's move up there and join the old Payne Avenue Baptist Church. So at 4 years old, I started attending. Leonard Carroll was the pastor, remember Leonard? And when I was 5, I was saved in this church. I met the Lord Jesus Christ right here. And in 3rd grade, Leonard baptized me right here in this baptismal. So I have a lot of history here. My grandmother, Esther Lindgren, I don't know if anybody remembers Esther. She lived to 104 years old, and this was her church. And my best friends, like, I don't know if Jane, you remember David Lindahl. He and I have been best friends for over 60 years, and it all started in this church. So I recognize a lot of faces as I look around, and I'm grateful for the influence you had on me as a kid and as a teenager. In 1975, my mom and dad felt called into ministry and planted a church in Indiana. So that's where I ended up, Indiana, and went to Indiana State University. I got to say it. I went to school with Larry Bird. Remember him? Yeah. And got a degree in music, and then I stayed and got a master's degree in student development. And then I immediately wanted to get back to Minnesota, so I moved back here and started working at Bethel University. And I married a Hoosier. And so Amy and I have been married for 37 years. We have 4 kids. They're all adults. I have 4 grandchildren. So I'm officially the senior on our staff. Yep. Well, pretty close. But we do have a lot in common. And Keith, I think you have a little pocket brochure that we can hand out.
I just want to say, board members, you've already got this, so you don't need to take it in. Couples, if you could just take one, then I think we'll have enough to go around.
We got a lot more.
Never mind.
They grow on trees. But I just really want to kind of anchor in on what we have in common. There's a lot of relationships that we have in common. And because we're both converged churches, there's a lot in common with our beliefs. And if you open this up, you can kind of see that we've taken the converge affirmation of faith and put it into 9 bullets to make it simpler for people to understand. But I think you would agree that we all believe in that there's one living sovereign God who eternally exists as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And you can read what we believe about Jesus Christ, about the Holy Spirit, about people being created in God's image, and they all matter to God. But everyone's a sinner, and they need a Savior. They need forgiveness. And those who confess and turn from their sin, trusting in Jesus Christ, will be saved by grace and have the promise of eternal life. And then you can see Jesus Christ is the head of the church. The Bible is the inspired word of God, and it's the supreme authority in all matters of faith and conduct. And we believe Jesus Christ will return, and there will be a final judgment. And what I like about those beliefs, they are so crystal clear. Excuse me, I have a frog. Dr. David Clark really helped us refine this and really helped me understand that these are the beliefs that you're willing to die for. Because we have other beliefs, but they're not as important. We have beliefs about baptism, we have beliefs about communion, but that's not enough to die for. But these are the ones that really unite believers all over the world. So that narrowing these down really, really helped us. Then the next thing, if you flip it over, you see values. It took us 2 years to figure out what our values were because we kept getting confused on what a value was. And I'll just say simply, values are behaviors. So think of these values are what a disciple of Christ would behave like. And so we're creating a culture of discipleship where people are following Jesus, and I would put it another little hash there, and helping other people follow Jesus. And then we want people to spend time with God, be in God's Word, be a person of prayer. But we want you to be connected in community with other believers. So that's the weekend. That would be maybe in a small group or a mid-sized group. But we want everyone to be connected to other believers. And then we want people to serve. So we're asking people that let's figure out your spiritual gift and let's put you to work serving in the church and in the community. And then finally to live generously with your finances. And we just said, man, if people would live these 5 things out, we could change a city. And right now we're in 10 locations, and we're just sensing God is at work, and we're seeing salvations and people's lives being transformed on a regular basis. So on the back, this is our mission statement, empowered by God to reach others for Christ. I think the 2 most important things here, though, are, if you look at this little triangle or pyramid looking, this is our vision culture. And we just went through beliefs and values, which are really the foundation. But it's, I think, the heart and soul of who we are, and I think of every Christ follower, is that we know our purpose and our mission. And purpose is different from mission. Mission is what are we doing? And we would boldly say what we're doing is we're going to do everything we can to reach people who are far from God. Why? Why do we want to do that? And after a long time of asking why, I had 4 kids, and that's their favorite question. Why? It really came down to, it's the great commandment. When Jesus was challenged by religious leaders, what's the greatest commandment? He said, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And then to love your neighbor as much as you love yourself. And then he went on to say, if you just do those 2 things, you will follow all the rules of God's heart. So we're striving to be a church where we as a staff, we as members, but all the volunteers, that we are people who love God and love others. And because we love them and because God loves them, our church invites their friends, their neighbors, and their families to come and hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I think we have a lot in common. And I think we can talk more about the strategies, because I think that's where you'll start to sense, oh, it's a little different at Eagle Brook. Is that fair? Yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
No, that's great. And I'll just say a couple quick things, and then we can start with questions here. I will say, people ask us all the time, well, what is happening at Eagle Brook? Why? Why is it growing? Why did it do that? And honestly, our first answer always is, I don't know. God is working in ways that we just don't understand. Because I can tell you, these guys, they're not that good. I'm not that good. None of us are that good. We're figuring things out as we go too, and so it really is God. But I would say a couple other things. I do think we are, and Dale was a huge part of this about 20 years ago or so, of really coming up with this model that I think has united us as a church. I don't think there's a lot on here that you would probably disagree with, and most churches that we work with don't. But to get it in a way that is so clear that most people who go to our church would be able to say, here's our mission and here's why. It has truly been one of the keys for us as a church. And so one of the things I just want to point out real quick, you can see that pyramid there, is there's 4 levels on the bottom, right? Dale talked about them. The beliefs, our core beliefs, there's 9 of those. That's the foundation of who we are. That's what we think the Bible says about who we are and who Jesus is and those kinds of things. The next level is what Dale said, is the values. This is who we want people to become. And we think if people become more like these values, they're going to become more like Jesus. And just a little a hint, those are all from Acts 2. That was the first church. Those are the behaviors that the first church really displayed. And so he said, well, we want to be that kind of church. And so those are our values. And then the purpose, like Dale said, to love God, love others, that's our why. And then the mission is our what we do. So those 4 things, we're very clear with our church on this. Those 4 things will never change. They'll never change. Our core beliefs aren't going to change. Our values aren't going to change. Our purpose, our mission, we just think those are biblical, and we think those are things that are not going to change. We actually then usually draw a line. There's sort of a line there. Yeah, good. There's a line there above that 4th one because the next level up is strategies. And guess what? Strategies change all the time. They really do. And what I have loved about being part of Eagle Brook for 22 years is that we're actually willing to change strategies when we recognize they're not working. And so we ask that question all the time. Is this working? And if not, why not? Let's ask that question, and then let's try to figure out a solution to make something work. So whatever ministry it is, whatever area of the church we're talking about, we're looking at those strategies all the time. And yet, we all have opinions. I think you have an opinion, right? I have an opinion. I have preferences. There's things that we do at our church, and I'm our executive pastor. There's things we do at our church that I'm not even sure I like, but it's my preference. And I'm 44 years old now, so I know I'm still young, I think, right? Well, okay. Dale would say so. But there's things we do now that it's like, I wouldn't choose to do that. But guess what? My daughter really likes that. And that high school kid really likes that. And that 24-year-old really likes that. And that kid's grandkid really likes that. It's like, well, let's think about that. And if it's not one of those bottom 4, well, then we can at least talk about it, right? And those are the things that we discuss all the time. And we change, and sometimes we make mistakes, and sometimes we have to alter. But that's really the big difference. And probably where a lot of your questions lie, honestly, is around strategies. And here's the other thing I like to tell other churches, is that when it comes to a lot of our strategy things we do, it's not to say how we do it is right and how somebody else is doing it is wrong, or vice versa. It's a preference. It's a choice that maybe churches make. And so hopefully that's helpful. But I like to make that distinction there. And then you see the very top is goals. We set goals at Eagle Brook, and sometimes that feels weird because we're a church and we're supposed to be more spiritual, and we actually think it's really spiritual to set goals because we actually set our main goals around our values. So those 5 things, we ask that all the time. How are we doing? Are people coming to faith in Jesus for the first time? Last year we had 6,000 and some people come to faith for the first time. at our church. I mean, that just blows me away. Each of those stories just blows me away. You know, are people getting connected in community? Are people serving at our church? And if they're not at a high enough rate, we start to ask those questions. Well, why not? And maybe we're doing something wrong, and we should try to fix that. So, anyways, that's a high-level view of how we view some of these things. I think we'll stop there and let you ask anything you want. Truly.
So your
happy.
turn. So now, as I mentioned, we're recording this tonight. Keith's got a microphone he's going to pass around. For the sake of the recording, we ask that you ask your question on microphone. All right. So who's first? All right. Well, thank you for coming, everyone. Let's start with Heather Marie.
Hi. So we've heard a lot of what Eagle Brook doesn't do during our town meeting or our family meeting. Can you tell us what Eagle Brook does do? Like, what are some of the benefits? What are some of the programs? We're hearing a lot of, oh, we don't do that, we don't do this, we don't do that. What are some of the do-dos?
That's a really good question. Yeah. Here's some of the things we value the most, I would say. I would put it in 5 big buckets, actually. I've used this for years. The weekend is really important to us. And so the weekend obviously is a time for our church to come together and corporately worship together. I think there's power in that. I think we all felt that when we couldn't maybe do that during COVID. And so we see a ton of power in people coming together at all of our locations on the weekend. Obviously, included in that is being able to invite people who are new to faith. We try to create an experience that is very welcoming, an experience that's very warm to them, that's friendly, and an experience where they don't have to have everything figured out necessarily to come to our church. Sometimes I think churches, it feels like, I can't go there because my life's a mess. We actually love those people coming to our church because we think Jesus is the answer to that mess. And so the weekend is number one. I would say number 2 is kids and students. And so we put, I can't tell you the amount of effort and staffing and money and everything else we put into kids and students. And so that's really 0 to 18. And so we have 2 different ministries for kids. We have a birth through preschool ministry called Cadodio, that stands for Kids of God. Everyone asks us what that means. Kids of God, and so that's birth through preschool. And then we have an elementary ministry called Elevate, that's 1st through 5th grade. And that happens at all of our locations. And that happens on the weekend. So anytime we're having a service, those are offered for our kids. It's world class. We create all of our own content for our kids. We have incredible experts who know kids and know the Bible, and we try to provide a service for them and volunteers who are going to meet their needs. And so our kids ministry is truly world class. On Wednesday nights, we have student ministry. So our middle school, 6th through 8th grade, is called Ground Zero, and then Revolution is 9th through 12th grade. This last week, I think we had 2,000 students come on a Wednesday night across all of our locations. And once again, we put a ton of effort into Wednesday nights, as much as we do the weekend, honestly, because we think students are that important. So those are the first 2. I combined some of those. Number 3 is groups. We truly believe that life change happens best in the context of community. We can all do our own spending time with God, but if we don't have other people in our life to stretch us, to grow us, to challenge us, to support us, we feel like people are missing out. And so I think we have about 12,000 people right now who are actually in a small group. And those are official people that we know who are in a small group. And so those are all different shapes and sizes. And so we have groups that meet in living rooms. We have groups that meet in coffee shops. We have groups that meet at a hockey rink. We have groups and so it could be based on an interest. It could be based on whatever the leader wants to do. It could be based on a study and studying a book of the Bible. It could be based on a topic and a group around parenting, for example. But we put a ton of effort into training our small group leaders and making sure that's a great experience.
Why don't you tell them it wasn't working very well, and so we made a change to do these
Yeah.
for 8 to 10 weeks.
Yeah, what Dale's talking about is it's scary to be in a group with people and especially to get in a group when you don't know anyone. And so this is something we did change a couple years ago, speaking of looking at like, that's not working very well. And how do we get more people to connect into this kind of community? And so we changed the model to being one where we launch groups like 3 times a year. And so in the fall, in the winter, in the spring, around different topics, and we say, hey, try this out for 6 weeks, or 8 weeks, or 4 weeks, or however long the group is going to go for, and see how that works. And what we found is that most of the time it does, or most of the time, most of the group keeps going, and then they become kind of a permanent group that goes. So, yeah, and then the fourth one is serving. Like Dale said, we want everyone to serve in our church, and so we want them to serve inside our church, but we also want them to serve outside our church. And so we can certainly talk about that more. We could talk a long time about all the things we're doing in the Twin Cities and around the world when it comes to serving and missions and all of those kinds of things around each of our locations. We can dive into that more. And then the fifth one is that. So serving inside the church is number 4. Serving outside the church was really something, I think 15, 17 years ago, we just said, hey, we've been growing so fast as a church, we've been just trying to keep up. How do we really make a difference outside the walls of our church? And that led us to have a lot of conversations around how do we do this better. So those are some of the big things I would say. There's a few different ways that we try to connect people. And so these might not be ministry areas per se, but they are ways we try to connect people. So for example, in August here, and we're doing this 3 times this year, we had a huge young adults gathering. One of the things that's becoming tougher and tougher for churches is I think students are growing up in the church sometimes, but then they go off to college and then they leave the church. And it's a sad state of affairs. And we're just saying we're not okay with that. So how do we connect people to our church? But here's a key maybe is that we didn't want to start a new ministry for young adults. Because what happens that we've found, and we've seen this in other churches, and we've seen this at our church at times, is that it starts to become a church within a church. And it starts to become, oh, that's what I go to, and I'm not really part of Eagle Brook per se, but I love going to this ministry, and it has a fancy name and whatever. So what we've tried to do with this strategy is say, we're going to create some opportunities for you to come and get to know other young adults, be challenged in your faith, but then we want you to meet some other people and actually get in a group. And we want you to start serving together, those kinds of things. And so that's really how we tackle a lot of the demographics, whether it's men or women or other different demographics that we have. So does that help? Yeah.
Just to add a couple others, when Tyler's talking about groups that we start regularly, we also started a new thing in the last couple of years called mid-sized groups that happen at different campuses throughout the year, and those might again hit a topic, but it's a little bit larger. Sometimes it's intimidating to come into a small group, and so here's an opportunity for them to take that step from going from maybe a big auditorium to a little bit smaller group, let's say 30 to 40, where they might study a topic or so. We have a ministry that's called Encompass that does cater to, through teaching and gathering of those that are Dale's age and older. And right? Can I say that? Is that legal? Okay. We're technically 55, so I'm really close to that. So I shouldn't be saying that. But it's a great ministry of, again, trying to connect that community. One thing that I love to share the story of, though, is that often there are people that come and say, I need something even more because maybe of an addiction or recently going through a divorce or something like that. And we have ministries that really dive deep in those, and they're phenomenal. And you wouldn't believe the amount of people that are coming into those spaces and being ministered to throughout the year. So we just have a whole variety of things like that. Hopefully, Heather, that gives you kind of a list to go off of, but excited to see what God keeps doing in those.
Hi, my name is Brandon. One small thing, curious on, do the names Will Kornbaum or Carson Frutiger ring any bells for you?
Yeah, Yeah, I know them both. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Kornbaum was my RA at Bodine at Bethel University,
Yes.
and may he rest in peace. Carson Fritiger was my freshman roommate.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think, was it Eagle Brook who donated all those books to his funeral?
Wow.
I think
Yeah.
it was. I don't know.
Thank you so much. For those of you that aren't aware, Carson came on our staff, and actually he and I started on the same day. Sat next to him during our orientation and getting onboarded, and one of our student pastors, and sadly went home to be with Jesus far too early, in our opinion. But sorry, we didn't. What was your name?
Brandon Pagano.
Yeah, sorry for your loss as a roommate, but boy, his family's been near and dear to our hearts and that journey. So, yeah.
Yeah, my question would be, since our church has a large Karen ministry, would you still be open to working with Anchored for those, whether to continue Wednesday nights, or what they also do is summer Wednesday nights throughout the year?
I think there's a lot of discussion that still has to happen. Yeah, I don't know what that would look like. They would certainly be welcome to be part of Eagle Brook's Wednesday night program. Not sure they would even want to participate, but that is exactly what we would love that if they would just join the ministry, so it would be, I think, more diverse. That reflects a lot of the neighborhood. You know, I live on the east side, so I still live really close to Trinity Baptist Church in my mind. And I'm now basically a minority in my neighborhood, and I love my neighbors. And so I would love for my neighbors to have a church that they can come to. So that would be ideal if they would just combine and join what we're doing. But other than that, I think we'd have to really talk about it and negotiate.
Yeah, it's a great question. Once again, we've just been invited into this process, so we don't quite have answers to all those. But Jim, if you wouldn't mind, Jim helps to oversee all of our impact ministries, basically. So we have local impact kind of ministries, global partners, and would you just talk a little bit about how that works across the board at Eagle Brook?
No, I mean, it's just been so fun to see this part develop, and it's really a partnership between Dale and I. Dale really over the global, myself over the local ministries. But we've discovered over the years that we're good at some things, but we're not great at all things. But there are ministries that are phenomenal, both here in the Twin Cities and around the globe. And we say as a church, how do we come alongside them and partner with them and help fuel their mission? And there's just a whole variety. Last year, we came alongside 29 different organizations, both in the Twin Cities and around the globe, and helped them, first and foremost, with finances, for sure. We say, boy, we want to support these mission-based organizations, but it goes beyond that for us because we truly call it a partnership. And so the Eagle Brook Association, which Dale oversees, comes alongside and says, boy, what type of training are you looking for, or ways that we can support you? And at, for sure, no cost to you, we want to help champion your mission and help your mission get stronger. And so each of our campuses has a partner. So every campus kind of adopts a partner. Most of them are within a few miles of their particular campus, and they host, encourage, send volunteers, give support and finances to those organizations. And so I think kind of, summing up to this question, boy, this would be one that we would love to hear more about, talk about. Is there ways to continue that partnership as we would learn, more from you all on that history and experience? So that's great.
Do all strategies apply to all of your campuses? And are there unique strategies that apply to different communities based on those campuses?
Good question. Good question. I would say most apply to all campuses, I would say. One of the things that you get in the deeper dive into the vision culture is we use a principle called the hedgehog principle. And we stole this from a book called Good to Great. It's a great leadership book. And they talk about a hedgehog. And the hedgehog only does a few things really well. And so and in the book, it talks about 3 questions that that are asked. What do you do best? And so we asked these questions years ago. What do you do best? And so whenever we're looking at a strategy, we look at that. And we would say, well, I'll let you teach it, Dale. Do you want to teach it? Sure. You're just dying.
Yeah, we would say, what do we do best, is to figure out what's relevant. And that's difficult because relevance is a moving target. It changes all the time. But I think we've learned to study the culture and how can we not change the gospel, but how do we deliver the gospel in a way that's relevant to the culture? And then what are we passionate about would be the second question. And we would say a transformed life. You know, how do we help people go from someone who's far from God, who begins to search, they accept the Lord Jesus Christ as their Savior. Now they're new in their faith. They get a new beginning. They begin growing. And ultimately that they would become a Christ-centered person. And the difficult thing about transformation is human beings don't want to take that last step. My dad used to tell me, Dale, the Lord intends to kill you. Just get it over with. And what he was really talking about was surrender. You need to fully surrender your life to Jesus Christ and make sure that he is in the center of your life, and then I would argue, and other people, because he created us to love him and to love others. And I think in Genesis 3, Adam and Eve, they ate the fruit and it messed all that up. And we want ourselves to be in the center. So when we talk about transformation, our heart is that there would be this cross where there's death to sin, but then there's another cross that Jesus talked about, pick it up every day and follow me, and that would be a death to self. So that's what we're passionate about in every ministry area of our church. And then finally, the last one is what is success? And what we've defined success is that when people take ownership for Eagle Brook Church, where they love the church, they're involved in the church, they're moving the church forward, and they don't just rely on the pastor or some other key volunteers to do it all, but together we as a church are going to accomplish the mission. So that's how we decide on strategy.
Yeah, so that's the hedgehog, relevant, transformation, ownership. That's the first filter we put something through. So this is back to your question here. We would say, does it meet all 3 of those things? And here's the example I always give is we could take our students on the most amazing retreat, and it could be the most fun weekend in the whole world. And so it was super relevant, but if it didn't change their lives in some way, if they didn't grow closer to the Lord, and they didn't become owners of their faith even, not just of Eagle Brook, but of their faith, well, then we would say, well, that wasn't a good strategy. And so it can't just do one of those. It actually has to do all 3. And so those are the things we would ask all the time. To your question of, is there differences between campus to campus, I would say a few. I would say 90% is going to feel very similar, and that's on purpose because there's power in that. And one of the things I think we found now that we're 10 locations is we don't have to recreate the wheel every time. And so when we hire staff and have volunteers, they're not having to decide, well, what should we teach in kids ministry this weekend? And that's a lot of work. Some of you, I'm sure, have helped with that. And now we have a whole team that does that. And so now these staff and these volunteers get to spend their time really pouring into the other volunteers and the kids and the students. The job looks a little different than that. And so we do see power in being the same in a lot of ways, but I think what we've realized is that based on the community we're in, there might be a few differences, and we don't want to be stubborn to that either. And so I think that's always a conversation. Yeah, and a lot of that, Dale's saying is some of the partners we partner with, what does that look like to help the community? Some of those things are probably the differences that we see. Does that help? Okay.
Couldn't tell if Dan really had a question. Oh, you too. Go there. We'll go here first. Don't worry. Ladies first.
Ladies first? Oh, okay, thank you. Well, I can see, looking at some of the things you said, that Brandon's question kind of ties in with some of the things you've said, because you said you have a passion to reach people who need Jesus and who are far from God. And you figure out what's relevant. And in this community, like you said, it's changing. And they said, I think this year more people will be born in Minnesota who are minority than who are white. And so that's the community God put us in. And I think as you expand to more and more campuses, that's the community you'll be dealing with. So what's relevant is going to change. And you said your strategies aren't fixed. And so you look at the community, what is relevant. And I think, we are looking for transformation for ourselves, but also for people in this community. And we have been seeing it slowly by slowly, transformation in the Karen kids, in some of the Nepali kids we have here who really need God and who are far from God. And you see when we're teaching, say something about heaven. They want to know what heaven is. Some of them are Hindu. They believe in reincarnation. Some are Muslim. They believe in, different. They have all these ideas that we have are so new and strange to them. They need God too. So when God puts us in a place, He puts us in a place for a reason, and it's hard for us to adapt because we're stuck in our own culture, but we need to adapt and become relevant to them. And you said, what your definition of success is when people take ownership of Eagle Brook Church. But I also think it's more than that. It's when people take ownership of the mission that God has given them. And so I would challenge you to kind of, when you go back, look at that more and how can you reach these people who need God.
Comment.
Let me just speak. That was great. I forget your name. I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you so much. That was really good. It is a conversation we have constantly as our communities are changing, and it depends where we're at. Our White Bear location is becoming more and more diverse, and that's very different than Anoka, which is very different than Woodbury. Actually, Woodbury is one of our most diverse campuses, percentage-wise. It's very high. And but it's a different kind of diversity. It's a professional, not economic diversity. Woodbury's a nice area, but it is professional diversity. A lot of these people who are working at 3M or other places, and so racially diverse for sure. And then we have other places that are more economically diverse, which is just Spring Lake Park is very economically diverse in the people that go there, for example. And so some of you might have heard this, but we bought a building down in Minneapolis. That's going to be totally different. And what is going to be relevant to that community? Those are questions we're having, and so it's a great point to make. And you're never going to be relevant to everyone. One of the things we've talked about for years is whatever audience we're trying to reach. How do we? And this isn't a magical number, but how do we be relevant to the 80%? And so, if there's 80%, or if there's 100 kids in this room, what's going to be relevant to the 80%? Like, let's go after that, because every kid's going to be different, and every student's going to be different, and so it's just something that helps guide us a little bit.
Jacob, can you put the handheld in the monitor for me? Maybe it's just me. I'm old too. 44, happy for you. Whatever. Are you driving yet? Did you get your license yet? Yeah. Will you talk? Let's see if it's
Testing,
oh, no,
testing.
A little loud.
1, 2, 3. There you go.
Hair
Testing,
less. Perfect.
testing.
Thank
1,
you.
2. Yeah, Dan Munson. I really like what was shared about the outreach piece, and not only in the church but outside the church in the community. Just want to get this is probably more dialogue later, but it's just some initial responses. For those that are here that are serving already in transformational ministries, especially to the refugee families, they are the ones that probably will be difficult to assimilate initially. We want to try that if this happens, to bring them in, but their parents aren't a part, they don't speak English, they're not a part of going to church. Should we bus them in? And so I'm kind of curious about how that would be if we started busing folks in. But the thing that we do in the community, we go to these kids and families that are so full of needs that they aren't able to come to the regular programming of most churches, including Eagle Brook. But the serving part, I'm curious to see, how would those of us that are already serving, you heard the word anchored ministries, that happens to be my family, myself, and a few others of us here that do this anchored ministries, but it's really just a partnership with this church. But how would it look? What would it look like in terms of embraced by Eagle Brook, encouraged by Eagle Brook for those that would be serving? Would it be through the small groups? Would it be, that would be we're Eagle Brookers, but actually serving these that aren't yet able to come yet to the weekends. However, we would be bringing some of them to the weekends, but others we would be doing tutoring with maybe during the week. We almost have like social services going with them ourselves. We have the closet right here for the clothing. We feed them meals every single weekend or every single Wednesday night. And so some of the questions that come up are, if possible, would the kitchen be somewhat initially possibly available for some of that, or could there be some rooms available on evenings when you're not using it for, so some of that kind of thing. So that's some of the things, because that thing's going. That's probably, I talked to 12 people in the last couple of days, and the biggest thing is, we'd be sad about the music, we'd be sad about all those kinds of things, of course. But some of that would be, what about these ministries that really are happening? That I know Eagle Brook. I mean, just to disclose, I was on staff 7 years, and it just feels like the Spring Lake Park model. I was there leading that church through this whole process just like this. And this church is so similar to the Spring Lake Park model. So I'm wondering how much would that be possible to have that flavor of the encompass, the senior adults ministry, and all of that kind of thing. So that's a lot just to kind of think about, but maybe just if you could respond to some of that. And then Mary, I don't know if you want to say more after that, but I'll let you respond a little bit. And Mary Carlson had shared several things with me, and she might want to share some more, but maybe see if she has it.
Well, I'm Mary, and I work in a number of different ministries here, much of with the community and kids from various backgrounds, and we have a lot of really strong volunteers who give their heart and soul to these ministries. And to be honest, these ministries are slow. And to say, well, we need to get them into the church, come to church. Well, they can hardly function, whether it's they need clothes or they're having struggles with legal issues for their foster kids, or they haven't eaten, before they got, the only meal they've had is on Wednesday night is at school. And so for that to not continue for some reason because it doesn't fit a strategy, that makes a lot of us uneasy, sad, because Lifepoint is a very unique place in terms of ministries. Yeah, we don't get a lot of people in this sanctuary on Sunday, but if you're around the building on Wednesday and on Monday mornings and when there's Bible studies and on Thursday mornings, and it's a very alive church. And to be pegged like this is, well, you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way. That's a difficult thing. And I guess just basically what Dan is saying, how can we work this out so that we can still minister? Because there are people that work very hard at this. They believe in serving others, that's the only way that we're going to bring them to Christ. Having them come to church is not the answer. We have to get at all their other needs first, and we need to continue that. And we're quite unique here, I would say, in this neighborhood and with the people that are working together as a community. And we need that feeling of community. I don't have a question.
That's okay. That's okay. It's a listening session, right? Yeah, we can just listen. First of all, it's amazing to hear what is happening here, and we've just been learning about that over the last many weeks here. So it's fun to hear that. I would say I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it looks like. Here's what I will say is we have done this 2 or 3 times now where this has happened with other churches, and I would say every experience has been different. And so I would say we would want to have those conversations. And the other thing I would say in all of those, no matter what happens with certain ministries, is we would definitely want to transition those and do that in a slow enough way that didn't just stop doing something. And so, like Jim said, there is a possibility that we could try to run a ministry like this. We don't know as a church how to do that very well. I mean, that's the honest truth, is the reason we don't do a food shelf or a clothing place or a name the need out there, right, is because we're not experts in that and we don't know how to do it. But what we do have is people who have a heart to serve, and so we try to find the best partners possible in the Twin Cities, and we partner with those. And so we have thousands of people who, Dan, this was part of your question, I think, is, well, how could you get involved, and what does that look like at Eagle Brook? I would say 2 things. Sometimes we promote things in a big way because, Blaine, for example, is partners with the prison ministry, up the road, and they have hundreds of volunteers, dozens and hundreds of volunteers who serve in that prison ministry, and it's because we talk about it and we promote it and we say, hey, this is your partner, we're gonna help serve there. But then we have, I was meeting with my small group this morning, and the guy was talking about a different group that he's in. He actually is recently divorced in the last few years, so he's in a divorced group, which we have divorce care, we have addiction recovery ministry, we have all kinds of things like that. And he was talking about how his group once a month goes down and serves at Union Gospel Mission. And they're one of our big partners too. And so we have hundreds of people who serve there once a month as well. And we didn't tell them to necessarily, they just saw a need and met the need. And so sometimes it's official, and sometimes it's because we talk about the value of how are you serving the least of these, which we talk about a lot, and people meet those needs. And so that's to answer your question, Dan. To answer your question, Mary, was it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. And I think we would look forward to more conversations to say, well, what would that look like, and what could we do? I don't think, by the way, I mean, nobody's asked, none of us are saying no. So maybe you're saying no in your mind. I think we're open to conversation.
Tyler?
And we're open to saying, well, what could that look like? And I don't want to promise anything because I'm not sure what it would look like, but I think we would want to talk with the main leaders of the various areas and say, well, what could this look like?
At our quarterly meeting that we just had on Sunday, a lot of these types of questions came up, and we just said we don't know.
Yeah.
And so these are the questions for you. I had a follow-up question, though, to this whole discussion. Is it possible that maybe a ministry like we're doing on Wednesday nights could be shared among all the Eagle Brook campuses, and maybe something like that could be done throughout the whole Twin Cities instead of just, having to go away, so to speak?
Potentially. I'm not sure I don't know much about
Yeah, you'd
this,
have to know more about it.
but I'm not sure that's a need at every one of our locations. That exact,
Okay, got it.
demographic.
Let me re-ask it this way. Has that happened at any one of these other takeover situations like Spring Lake Park Baptist? Have they brought something unique to Eagle Brook that has been shared at other campuses?
Yeah. Spring Lake Park.
Or any of the other campuses?
I'm not sure. That's a
All right.
good question.
It's just-
There are times where we learn something that works at one location, and it's like, wow, we should do that
Okay.
everywhere else.
So is that prison ministry, that's unique to the Blaine location?
Blaine.
Okay.
Because it's right next to the Lino Lakes
Right.
prison,
Yeah, I know.
basically.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we really have tried to make it localized. Not that there's not many needs in all the neighborhoods, but once again, we're not the experts, and so we try to hand that off. But
Yeah, Tyler, go ahead, Dale.
Well, I would say we have several ministries that our people in our congregation have launched. One of them is called Five Stone, and they really have a heart to work with prisoners. And so we partner with them, but it's not a ministry of Eagle Brook Church. So they get funded on an annual basis, and now they have figured out, and we provided technology for them to do this. They're bringing Eagle Brook services into the prison, or into Hennepin Jail, I think. And we're trying to get into Stillwater and some other prisons too. But it's these people who just attend our church that this has become their ministry, and we're finding ways to help support them. Healing Haiti was another one. It's like we're not ready to launch a missions program in Haiti, but there were people in our church that were ready to do that, and so we support them financially, and a lot of volunteers go down there and serve. Unfortunately, it's too dangerous to go down there right now. There's no government, and it's just total chaos. So no trips are going down, but we still financially support that ministry.
Yep. Yeah, Dan Munson again. Yeah, I think as far as the Spring Lake Park, the dialogue when I was there was, that Encompass, that senior adult ministry, and how that was able to be a congregational-sized group, which was unique. Only White Bear had that. And that was the first, and I don't know if that's even been offered since. I think Blaine had it, we had combined with Blaine and Spring Lake Park when I was running it back then. But that would be something that could be passed on to here, similarly, possibly. Another kind of a group like that for seniors. So there's some of that would be unique to here, maybe. So.
Well, I think we would encourage you to go up to White Bear. There's over 100 seniors that gather every Wednesday morning, and they're singing hymns together, they're sharing prayer requests together. Just this last Wednesday, I brought a teaching to them, and then they split up into small groups. So they're, I would say, quite organized, but all volunteer-led. But that's an important ministry that happens at White Bear and Spring Lake Park, but those are the only two. People drive in to attend those, and this location is not far at all from the White Bear location. So I would say we just combine it.
Thanks.
I'm Steve. I have to admit that what concerns me most about this possible move is the sister congregations that we have, how this would affect the sister congregations that we have here. They are distinct congregations in their own right, but I think we'd all agree we feel that they are family, part of the Lifepoint family. I would just like to point out that they are not just different cultures that prefer rice over potatoes. They are fundamentally non-English speaking, at least two of them. One of them is perhaps bilingual. So it's really a lingual or a language issue. Here's my question. Does Eagle Brook have any experience, any model for how you would handle a non-English speaking sub-congregation or service?
I'll quickly get to your question in just a second, but before I do, I just want to say something or echo what Tyler said. Way to go, church, on not giving up on your community. Because sadly, what we often see as we coach churches, help churches continue to thrive, and they're on mission for what's in the building, but they're not on mission anymore for their surrounding community. So way to go, man. That warms our heart when we hear that. And to answer your question, we really don't have that direct experience, but I think as we are learning your story, I think what Tyler and Dale and I are saying is, man, we want to keep learning the story and have those conversations, whether it's about the direct ministry you're doing in the facility or your sister congregations, to say, okay, let's learn more and have those discussions. I mean, I think in some ways we're so early on in this, and you're listening and hearing us talk, but we're listening tonight too, and a great opportunity for us to learn from you in this journey. So,
One real quick. That's one of those strategies that could change, honestly, as our communities are becoming more diverse, like we talked about earlier. Who knows? That might be something we do more of, depending on the community we're in. So, I think we're open to it, but we haven't done it so far.
This may be a little bit premature, but a question that keeps going through my mind is, my assumption is the building will be remodeled, and that will take some time. And I know that the suggestion has been made to go to White Bear, or go to one of the other campuses. We have people from our community that could walk almost to Lino Lakes. But what does that time, assuming we vote yes, do you have any sense of timeline for when we have the last physical meeting here, and what do we do during that transition time, and when there would be an opening?
Don't quite know yet. Here's what I would say our team has talked about a little bit is we have two campuses opening in the next year already scheduled. So Minneapolis, we're opening also another campus in Apple Valley. We were in a high school down in Lakeville, and we're opening that right before Christmas here. We bought a Menards building because we're saving big money at Menards. And we actually are. We're saving a lot of money by buying an existing building and renovating it, and it's an amazing location, and I just think thousands of people are going to encounter Jesus. And so that's happening. Minneapolis is happening later into the spring, summer of next year. And so we've had to look at this from when could we actually do this on our end? And it's what we've told the board is for us to actually hold services, it would probably be next fall. And so that's kind of what we're working off of. Now, the vote could happen a lot sooner than that. We would need a few months to remodel. And by the way, every building looks different when we do that. If you go to our Spring Lake Park campus, actually, it looks a lot like this. In the ceiling, we've changed the chairs and we've done some things, and the kids areas and those things. And so we would need a few months to do that. One of the things I know, Ross, I watched the meeting from Sunday. One of the things I know he shared was just the financial situation at this church too. And so as we're, if this were to happen, we're taking on that financial situation. And so to be perfectly honest with you, if the church continues to lose money, that's money that we're going to need to now recover, and that's going to be our debt. And so that is a discussion we have to have with the board to say, well, what is the right time frame when it comes to that? And I in a lot of ways, it's going to be It's going to be the church's decision of when actually services would stop happening as Lifepoint. But if this were to happen once again, there's sort of a domino effect there too, and it does affect us if this were to happen. And so there's everything I know, truly, in terms of sort of what we're thinking, but in terms of exact time frame, we're not quite sure yet.
Tyler, I'll add to this. I don't know, somewhere along the line, maybe in discussion with Ross, I got the feeling that, let's say you're not ready to launch this until fall, we shut down sometime in spring or early summer, and you're not in here renovating yet, we certainly could use this facility in this sanctuary here to feed in the Eagle Brook service here. So people wouldn't necessarily need to go to another campus. Has that happened at any other takeover situations?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, I'm just throwing it out there.
We haven't done that before, I don't think. We found different ways to be unique maybe in that.
Okay.
Yeah, we would have to play
Right.
that. I think that the toughest part that the church is going to have to figure out is how do you stop spending money when things are going the other way.
Got it.
And so,
All right.
once again, we're coming into this in a little different angle and just trying to help, but that's something the church is going to have to decide. And so,
Are there other questions? Can you hold on? You've had two already.
Yeah, I'm done.
I can get him first, and I'll come back to you, Dan.
On May 18th, 2023, this congregation, this church body, celebrates 150 years, and that may be a target for us to go to the 150 years. Very few churches make it that far, and I know that we can have quite a bit of publicity for it. We were on the front page of the Minneapolis paper, along with Community of Grace in White Bear Lake, because we changed our name. I don't know what, 5-6 years ago, whatever it was. They had pictures of both buildings and so on. So 150 years is a big deal, and that might be, even if you needed to, if this does take place, that you vote and we vote to go ahead with this, even if you needed more time to begin the renovation, we could write that into a contract and so on. But it would be very fitting for us to have a big celebration marking the 150 years. Let the world know that we've been 150 years, but next week, if this all goes through, we're going to be part of Eagle Brook, and that would be publicity for you as well as for us. So that's just a thought.
well, no matter what happens, you have to celebrate that, and hopefully we'll celebrate it with you no matter what too. That's amazing, honestly, 150 years. And so, just in our conversations as a team, what a cool thing that the church can continue on. Who knows, another 150 years. That's how we view this. This is not about Eagle Brook, honestly. It's about the kingdom, and I would say that to any church. And I hope that if we were in the same situation, we'd be saying the same thing. And so that really is our heart. So a huge celebration for sure.
Yeah, my name is Dan. My question relates to the missionaries that we currently support. So I don't know exactly how many missionaries this church supports, but I am one of them. I am resigning, so I won't be much longer. But I'm wondering what happens when you take over a church to the support that's has been sent or has been committed to missions.
You know, honestly, again, this is a piece of your story that we don't know the full story, and so we would want to sit and hear that. I don't want to speak out of line or out of turn for Eagle Brook, but I think, again, as Tyler said, we would want to help create a transition plan of some sort after we hear that story. And we don't, Eagle Brook supports a lot of organizations, mission organizations, as well as we already said locally. We don't support necessarily individualized missionaries as a church, but we definitely would want to hear where you're at and discover through conversation what's the best way to care for that in a really healthy fashion. So,
Other questions for Eagle Brook?
I can say, I remember with Spring Lake Park, we had some missionary families that we kept supporting, but they knew that that was going to taper off because our strategy is to work with organizations around the world that are working through the local church. But we didn't just cut the legs out from those missionaries from Spring Lake Park. We figured out a transition plan.
My name is Carly. I have a question just about how the logistics look for a Sunday service. I've been to the White Bear location for a couple of services and seen that before all the kind of satellite churches. What does that look like?
Yeah, it would look very similar to White Bear Lake. Were you there in the last 15 years? So you experienced it. For those of you who haven't, I'll just try to give you an overview of what that looks like. Every one of our locations has a team of staff that work at that location. And so generally speaking, we have 5 or 6 pastors that are at every one of our 10 locations. We have what's called a campus pastor, and they're kind of the lead pastor at that location. And they lead the staff, they lead the volunteers, they lead everything that happens at that campus. And really, then on the weekend, our message, our sermon, is via video. And so it is live, but it is coming from our Lino Lakes campus. And so there's a few reasons we do that. We've been doing that for 15, 16 years since we actually started to do more than one location. And the reason being is it is really hard to find amazing communicators of God's word. So that's one of the biggest reasons. And just the clarity around being consistent of where we're going as a church. So we really are one church in multiple locations. And so the everything else at each location is live. And so once again, the music is live. The campus pastor connects with the congregation live. And if there's any announcements or vision that they're casting, that's live. And then it really is just usually towards the end of the service where the sermon or message is, where you're getting that from Jason or one of our other teaching pastors from Lino Lakes. And so honestly, when we started doing this 15, 16 years ago, none of us, well, you and I, you weren't around, but Dale and I are like, I'm not sure this is going to work. Who's going to go and do this? Like, we were skeptical, but we were out of room. And so that's the reason we had to do it is, well, we want to make room for more people. And so sometimes people think we are more strategic than we are. It really was, oh, shoot, we're out of room. What do we do now? We better try this. And what we found out is that God works through that technology too. And so our kids ministry is live. Everything else is live. Obviously, it's about the people. It really just is that 30, 35-minute message that is. Is the music live each? Yep, the music is live at every location. So there's a live band, there's live worship leaders, there's, everything else is live at all of our locations.
3,000 people see it live.
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing is this last weekend, at our physical locations, we probably had 18 or 19,000 people show up. And only 3,000 of those actually saw it live, the teaching. So as we've grown, we've gotten to the point where it definitely is a minority of the people who actually see Jason or Ryan or John or whoever's speaking actually live. And so once again, it's just one of those God things that we couldn't have predicted 15 years ago.
If you would ask your question on the mic.
Okay. We got a question back here, and then I'll come up there.
Yep. Brandon again, just to piggyback off us soon celebrating 150 years, would you entertain the idea of, instead of, if we become adopted, it just being called, Eagle Brook St. Paul, would you be open to like it being called like Lifepoint and Eagle Brook Church, or like having your name and our name combined together instead of something that just says Eagle Brook St. Paul?
Yeah, that's a good question, one we've entertained before. We would not. This, you know, and I'm just being honest with you, this would not be a merger. We've seen churches try to do that in the past, and it never works well, honestly. That's been our experience, and so we've been really clear that this, I mean, what your board is proposing is that this would basically dissolve and be gifted to Eagle Brook, and so it would be an Eagle Brook location, and the way we've done it, at least, is call it Eagle Brook and then kind of the city where it is. So Maplewood.
Have you ever had technical difficulties where the video feed did not work, and what did you do?
Yeah, that was your question,
Yeah, it
right?
was.
Yes, we have had technical difficulties. I would say we have some of the best in the world on our production teams, and we have about 4 or 5 backup plans in case that happens. One of the things that happens occasionally, and nobody ever knows, is that if Saturday night, we have Saturday night services at a lot of our locations too. If Saturday night happens well, then we're golden for Sunday morning. So if something happens and we can't get the live feed, this is all through fiber optics, and it's crazy the technology that goes into this to assure that it's a great experience. If that doesn't work on a Sunday morning, for example, we've flipped over to the message from last night, and nobody knows. Unless they said, "Oh, this is great to be with you on Saturday night," and we've tried to tell them not to do that. So.
You know, we started out recording on a hard drive and then driving it in a metal suitcase, you know, and dropping it off at the next site. And then we went to microwaves, so we're bouncing the signal off of water towers. And I was told that's like pulling a horse trailer with a minivan. You can do it, but you probably shouldn't. And rather than going to satellite, we decided to go to fiber optics. But the problem with that was you're using Comcast and you're sharing that little tube with other companies. And if a bank is deciding to back up all their data, they're going to do it Sunday morning, which then puts our service at risk. And so when we would have glitches like that, we finally went to this thing called dark fiber. And I'd never heard of dark fiber before. And what it means is it's dedicated fiber to Eagle Brook Church. Nobody else is using it. And that has made it very, very reliable.
One of the other things that I think is interesting is we actually do the same thing on Wednesday nights. So with students, what we found is we can hire amazing student pastors at every one of our locations. So this location would have a student pastor who loves and cares for volunteers and students, but they don't have to preach. And what's really hard is to find someone who can do all of that really well. And so one of the benefits, honestly, as we've become bigger as a church, is that we're able to specialize a little bit and use people for what they're really, really good at. And so if somebody's an amazing preacher of God's word, well, guess what? They could be one of our teaching pastors. But if they're a great leader and great with people, well, then they can be one of the leaders at one of our locations. And so the same thing happens on Wednesday night. Our students are getting some of the best communicators of God's word in the country every Wednesday night. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I have a 7th grade daughter who can't wait to go to church on Wednesday nights. And so it's amazing to see that. So that technology, it's exactly the same as the weekend. Everything else is live band at all of our locations on a Wednesday night for students. We put as much into that as we do the weekend, but it's really just the message that is on video.
Hi, Joyce Harley. I have a question about volunteers. You've gone into other churches before, and there have been people that have served in those churches very actively. And in this room, you have a lot of people that do a lot of serving, and they're very active in making Sunday happen, Wednesday happen, choir happen, worship team happen, women's ministries happen. And I guess my question is, you feel kind of like the rug is going to be pulled out from underneath us that are active and very involved when we combine. And my question is, how do you incorporate the people who want to share Jesus, want to grow in their faith, but want to serve?
That's awesome. First of all, we would want and need all of you. We have at our church, here's the little secret, is we're a large church. I think we have 400 and some people we actually pay. Okay, that's our staff. But we're a very large church, right? We have 9,000 and some volunteers. Those are unique people. Some of them serve like you do in 5 different areas. So we don't count them 5 times. Those are 9,000 and some people who serve at least once a month in some role on the weekend or on Wednesday nights. And so one of the things we've done the last couple times that we've combined, I liked your word, with another church, is we would do a lot of work leading up to this to help you and help anyone else discover, well, where's the best place for you to serve at our church? And so we would come in, we would lead some sessions like that. We would try to help you identify what that is. We would train you in whatever those roles are. And so we would put a ton of work into that. Yeah.
Add to what Tyler just said. We just went through this experience in the last couple of years with our Ham Lake campus. Horizons Community Church became our Ham Lake campus. And really one of the first things that we did was gather who are the owners from Horizons that we want to cast vision with, but to say, we still need you. We still need you desperately in a variety of areas. And as Tyler said, get to know you. What is your passion area? How do we incorporate you into that? And it's been so fun. My family lives a stone's throw from the Ham Lake campus, and I serve there once a month as a volunteer. And to see some of those Horizon folks now just beaming because the foundation that they helped lay down has just seamlessly continued, and they're active and a part of it and saying we're all in. So we would do that right out of the gate.
Hi, I'm Hillary Healy. Our Lifepoint's been pretty progressive. I always look for Brad for our repository of knowledge. We actually ordained a female minister fairly early. Do you have any idea what year? What was it? 1926. So I hear you talking about a lot of teaching pastors. I know there's a site pastor at every campus. Do you have any female pastors or teaching pastors or women in roles besides like a youth minister pastor, something like that?
Another great question. We literally were looking at some stats today. I think half of our pastors at Eagle Brook are women. I think it's about half and half. We probably have 80 or 90 pastors on staff. A lot of them are at our campuses. Some of them are central pastors, and it's really close to half. So in all different levels, we do have a woman on our leadership team. She's actually going to come on Thursday, and she's been part of all of our conversations. We have 2 women right now on our board, and so yes, we definitely. We have a female campus pastor as well. So a lead pastor at our Ham Lake campus is a female as well.
Do they speak on Sundays? Are they ever the teaching pastor?
We don't have a female on our teaching team currently, but we have had women speak on the weekend. So it just happened a month ago?
Yeah, I was going to say, I saw a female guest
so
speaker.
it was a guest
ago.
speaker, and
Yeah.
we have 4 or 5 maybe guest speakers throughout the year, and we had an unbelievable guest speaker about
awesome.
a month ago. So Lisa Harper is her name. She's phenomenal. So. This is a bonus to that question. I'm sorry. Here's what I would say is it is really hard to find women who are phenomenal teachers. For whatever reason, there's not enough of them. And I would love if there was more. So it is a struggle to find women who are, who are at the level that we're looking for. And so hopefully that's something we can develop over time. We've had women speak in our student ministries too. And we've had women pastors as teaching pastors in our student ministries. So,
tell us a little bit. My name's Sue. Tell us a little bit about how church structure works, coming from, our experience with local church voice. You talk about a single board, but a very large operation. So, how is the local church, the moving of the Spirit at that local level incorporated into this larger organization? How does the structure work? I'm having a little trouble getting my head around it.
Yeah, no, good question. We are one church with many locations, and so we have one set of bylaws, we have one constitution, we are one church, and so we have one board. It's not necessarily representative of all of our locations, but a lot of our locations are represented on that board. So we have a location down in Rochester, and one of our newest board members, for example, is from Rochester. And so just real quick, there's 8 people on our church board. Jason Strand, our senior pastor, is one of those 8. They serve 2-year terms. They can serve up to 3 terms, and then they have to go off the board. All of those board members get elected by a nominating committee, and that is voted on at an annual meeting. So we have an annual meeting every July where the budget is voted on, where board and nominating committee positions are voted on as well. And so, yeah, I would say because we're a big organization, our board provides. So Jason reports to our board. So he gets accountability and direction from our board for sure. But then really we are staff led in a lot of ways too. So most of the initiatives, most of the strategies, most of the day-to-day is really led by staff. And that's just because of our size. I think smaller churches function differently because of that, and they have to be way more involved. And so our board really provides accountability, like I said, financial oversight. What else? Yeah, yep. Yeah, they're really advisors and making sure that nobody's getting out of line.
Tyler, it sounds very similar to ours. We're just kind of curious, by the way. How many attenders did you have at your last annual meeting? How many people attended? Any idea?
400.
Okay.
Here's one of the things. Our church is very trusting, and we've worked for, 30 years or 74, however you want to look at it, to build trust with our church. And so I think that's one of the reasons, is that our church just really has a ton of trust in our leadership, in our board. And so honestly, our board meetings are some of the most, is one of the most favorite things that I go to every year, because we just really celebrate what God did. We're able to share, here's what God provided, here's the plan for next year. And it's a very supportive
That's fine.
group.
Thanks.
So, yeah, we do have membership. That's another piece of it. Yep. For the size of church we are, we don't push membership probably as much as others do. A lot of it's because membership for us, we view a little differently. It's important, but at the same time, we'd rather have people who are owners in what we're doing. We'd rather have them doing our values, and sometimes that turns into membership for people, but a lot of times it doesn't. And we do have people who come from a wide variety of backgrounds where membership means different things, whether it's the Catholic Church or no church, or that's kind of a foreign thing. And so we have about 2,400 members, I think, 2,400 members currently. And so just to give you an idea, that's a fraction of how many people actually come on the weekend. But those, they're obviously some of our biggest owners and people who have been around a long time. So,
other questions?
I'll just say one sentence that Tyler said, but I'll just say it again. A a lot of churches often the first thing they're pushing is membership, and we see it as the icing on the cake. And it's so fun for me to be in conversations to what Dale just taught on, to see them go into full ownership and to be following Jesus, growing in their faith, getting in a group, serving, living out a life of generosity. And I'm sitting with them and they're saying, you know, I really would like to take that next step to membership. And it's like, yeah, that's awesome. Let's talk about that. So it's just a little bit of a unique nuance with the way we kind of approach it versus some churches.
Hi, my name is Linda. Just a question. You're going to see a lot of us seniors. Talk to me a little bit more about your Encompass program. And also, I'm going to ask something here that's probably a touchy subject. Do you have a traditional service?
I've been talking a lot. Dale, this is yours. Dale's parents are involved in Encompass, so he hears about it all the time.
Yeah, my dad retired when he was 70, and I said, no, you're going to come and work at Eagle Brook. So for 10 more years, he worked till he was 80 as the pastor to senior adults. I would say that is our traditional service, is that Wednesday morning, and it feels just like a traditional service. They love each other. That's a group of people, a lot of them come 30 to 45 minutes early so they can have coffee and sit around and talk. And then it's time for the service to get started. They all go in and they sit in rows and they sing some songs together. And then they make announcements about prayer requests. And they love the people they're praying for. And my mom and dad still go on hospital visits. And then there's a teaching, but then they're all in a small group. So when the formal teaching is over, they all go to their room around a table, and then, like I taught last Wednesday, I provided some discussion questions. So that's as traditional as what we have. But the weekend is what the weekend is at every location.
Is that, what you were just talking about, is that at one location, White Bear? Or two locations?
White Bear has the most formal service, but Spring Lake Park also has.
They do, okay.
A ministry for senior adults.
Would you entertain a third?
Not.
I'm asking that on behalf of the others. Anyways.
Not likely.
All right, we'll see. Any other questions?
They actually do.
Okay.
Yeah, they have a volunteer who shoots a video.
Well, and it all depends on, Spring Lake Park has changed over time. Dan, you were part of this. What did you say, 16 years ago?
Yeah, 2007.
2014,
I did the Encompass ministry.
And a lot of those people are still part of our church, but it has dwindled because they've gotten older. And so the group is not 100 anymore, but it's 12 or 15, and when you have 12 or 15, it just needs to look different. So they still gather, and they still pray, and they still read God's word, and but we provide them a space to be able to do that and the resources to do that. And so it's not quite a service anymore. It was as of 2 or 3 years ago, but
there's over 120 people.
Right. So it just depends where you're at. So there's different ways to do it.
I don't want to stop this. Keep asking questions, keep sharing things. I want to remind you, when we get to the point where you're out of questions tonight, we'll certainly give these gentlemen an opportunity to make final comments. But again, we have another one of these scheduled for this Thursday at 10 a.m. All right? And you can come to that. And we're going to schedule more. Sorry. I don't have that date for you, but it'll be soon, I promise. I was going to suggest a week from tonight, and then I was reminded we have a board meeting. So I should go to that, okay? All right. But when you are done asking questions for the evening, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then I'm going to invite anyone that wants to come back in. We'll excuse these gentlemen, and we'll have the opportunity to speak amongst ourselves, share feelings, thoughts, and how dumb I was to pay for 2 22-year-olds. McDonald's meals.
You were just generous.
Generous, how generous I was. Juanita has a question.
Yeah, I'm Juanita, and I'm co-chair of the mission board. So I was very interested in hearing part of what you said to Dan, who is one of our supported missionaries. I'm also a lifetime Converge Baptist General Conference person, and that's a lot of history. And Rah Bethel and Rah Converge, how closely are you guys affiliated with Converge?
Very closely. There's a lot there. So I personally have been very involved with the regional Minnesota, Iowa, and I meet with Mark Bjorlo and prior to that, Dan Carlson once a month, just for, they look to me to, will you just mentor me and be an advisor to me? And a lot of it's just, will you be my friend? Because it can be a lonely job at times. So I'm very involved with that. I'm very, very involved with the national. I was on the search committee to get Scott Rideout in as their president, and then was asked to be on the national board, and then I was asked to be the chairman of the board for the national Converge. And still very, conversation almost on a daily basis with leaders from around the country with Converge. Since missions, Ethiopia has been part of the BGC for a long time. And we are still heavily supporting the work that's happening over there in Ethiopia. And I'm personally trying to figure out a trip where I can go over there with one of my colleagues and do some pastoral training and train like 100 of their students. So still very involved there. And I know you guys have a connection in Ukraine. And so do we. And we have a very close connection with the church that you helped build in Chigorin. I'm very close to Nikolai. Remember Nikolai? And his daughter married Ruslan, and Ruslan was told to go plant a church in Ratzevo, and that's where we got connected at Eagle Brook. Ruslan in Ratzevo, a little village, he became our sister church. And I think he had, when I went over, you were with me, there were probably 20 people in that little village church, and 3/4 of them were babushkas. And to see this young man's leadership just explode, he now he still lives in Chigorin, right across the street from Trinity Church there, but he has a church plant in Cherkasy that has gotten to the point where they have to do 3 services every weekend, and there's now 5 churches in the region that are under his leadership, and Trinity Church in Chigorin is one of them. So every time I go to Ukraine, which is once or twice a year, I'm at the church that you helped establish. And I just think that's fantastic that there's that kind of relationship. Unfortunately, since the war started, haven't been able to get over there, but with the war, Eagle Brook did some significant funding. You probably know more about that. But through like 3 or 4 different organizations, I would say close to $800,000 of support went to help the refugees in Ukraine. My team does a Zoom call on a regular basis with the church in Ukraine. Used to be once a week when the war first started, and then it turned into now once a month because they're not safe, but that region of Ukraine is much safer. Until just a few days ago, the Russians started bombing out all their electrical grids. And so I was supposed to meet with them tomorrow morning, but can't because they have no Wi-Fi. They have no way of connecting with us. But
what was the story we heard a week or 2 ago?
Yeah, 3 weeks ago, they write a letter and they go, "Oh, Dale, excuse me, we had over 800 people in church last weekend between their 5 locations, and 14 people gave their life to Christ that weekend." And yeah, isn't that amazing? And then they go on to say, and now they all want to be baptized. And so this will be the 4th baptism service since the war started, because so many people are coming to faith. And they're all new people because they're all refugees coming from the east, and they come to Cherkasy, and they're finding this church that's feeding soldiers, feeding refugees, and they're making it their home church. And so they're full every single weekend, even though a lot of their congregation has already fled. It's like the whole church has flipped with new people, but they're all giving their life to Christ. And you guys played a huge role in that. Huge role.
Breach. That's good stuff right there. Honestly, guys, 14. Had you not done what you did years ago, would those 14 have come to faith? That's just amazing. Also involved in the question was Converge itself. I think everybody would be aware, but just so you are clear on this, we are a Converge church ourselves, and so as Dale said, we're very involved, and as well as with Bethel. All 3 of us, these guys, undergrad level, me at the graduate level, are alums of Bethel.
No, I'm not.
Sorry.
I just worked there for
That's
12
right, you just worked there. You just worked there. Larry Bird was where you went to school.
I worked at Bethel for 12 years.
It's like you graduated from Bethel when you worked there that long. But anyway, love Bethel. I had lunch last week with Ross and Annie, the new president at Bethel. Great hearts. They attend Eagle Brook, and we're just trying to say, how can we also support you and your leadership and what you're doing? Ross brought his whole leadership team to meet with Tyler and us as a leadership team in the last couple months of saying, how do we work together better? Also involved in the Converge denomination is Trout Lake Camp. Hopefully there's some fans in here of Trout Lake Camp. We love Trout Lake Camp. And camps, I should say. If you haven't been there in the last couple of years, I encourage you to get up there and check it out. It is amazing what God is doing up there. Our senior pastor speaks at some of their family camps. I was there in October and spoke at 2 of their fall retreats, which is just a blessing to be a part of. We send our students up there. They do their own retreats, but we use Trout's facilities. We do 2 senior high retreats that are coming up in November, and then our junior high retreats are later in the spring. But we love that space, and we love being a part of the Converge denomination.
It's exciting to hear about Ukraine. I was on the team that did the first day camp at Rotsville. But that's aside. Anyhow, I just want to put an information thing in. In the work we do with the Korean Church, we're very involved with Edgerton Elementary School, which is the elementary school down the street. And I just throw that out there. There's a lot of history, but there's things that they benefit, and I don't want to just forget about them as we are having discussions about possible things that'll happen.
Yeah, one of the things, I'll speak for myself. Jason and myself challenged our campuses actually last year and just said, just reminded them, you are in this community for a reason. How are you going to make a difference? And a lot of that has to do with schools. And so over the years, we've been involved with schools, with school districts, when it comes to after school programs, all different kinds of things. We have all kinds of people who volunteer in those, and that's really led by our staff at each location. And so those are definitely relationships that could keep going, especially for certain volunteers that are really plugged into those schools. And so, yeah, we wouldn't want that to go away, that's for sure. The school's still in the neighborhood, so we better care about them, right?
Yeah.
That's at least our view.
By the way, that's where I went to grade school.
Oh.
Is an alum of that school, so that's good. Yes, just to be clear. Yeah. In addition to that, not only do we want to be involved and connected, but we have a very unique revenue stream, if you will, that the way the parameters are set up with it, the government does not allow us, with this particular one fund, to give it to faith-based organizations. And so what Tyler just said, we literally said to our campus pastors, Go into those schools, go into your community, and don't just be a blessing by volunteering, but you have an opportunity to help support them because, frankly, a lot of their funding has been cut off. And so some of our local schools have gotten funding from Eagle Brook to support what they're doing as they try to teach and train students. And so, yeah, so basically, and honestly, it's not unique just to Eagle Brook, but when a company provides a match, so say you give a gift to the church and your company gives a match, well, some of those companies have parameters around the match that, yes, we'll match your donation to your organization, but we will not allow those dollars to go to a faith-based organization. And so we still receive those funds, but we purposely direct those to honor the request of that, let's say Medtronic or another company, and those funds uniquely get distributed to food shelves, homeless, organizations that work with the homeless, elementary schools, that kind of thing.
Okay, I have a comment about Converge. I don't know if you know that our little Thai church that's here is a Converge church. So they, I don't know what will happen to them too. Steve made a comment about our sister churches, but I have an idea. I don't, that, all right, you're essentially getting a gift worth maybe 10 million of this church and the property if we vote that way. How about if you give a tithe of that to the churches that are here and some of the ministries that are here, so that if they are displaced, that they have some fund to start somewhere else. Just a thought.
I think the negotiating has begun.
This is sort of related, sort of not, but honestly, as we've, I've been here 18 years, Dale's been here longer, as we've become a bigger church, one of the things we've tried to keep in perspective is, to much is given, much is required. We really take that seriously. Okay, God, for whatever reason, you've made us a big church. Well, that means a lot to us, and what is going to be our response? And so one of the really cool things we've done the last few years is to be able to help other churches, but other organizations. And so we've done something the last few Februaries called Make a Difference, and it's a whole weekend where we talk about all of the things we're doing around the world, locally, and once again, those 29 partners that we have. And what we tell people is we're gonna take an offering, and whatever money has come in that weekend, we're gonna give it all away. So nothing that comes in that weekend goes to Eagle Brook. And last year, it was $2.9 million. And so we were able to help a few churches, actually. And so we had a whole team of people that we asked for requests from our different partners, and what are your needs, and what are your requests, and all of those kinds of things. And we were able to provide massive amounts of money to some of these places, and some of them were churches that had some serious needs. And we just, once again, we have a heart for all churches to thrive. So sort of related.
Hi, my name is Dan. How does Eagle Brook handle weddings and funerals and things like that? Traditionally, we're going to this church, we have our pastor, we have our own food service, we take care of ourselves, but now, do we have a pastor that's here? We go to him and say, well, you can answer my question.
Yeah. Ross, you sent me this question. Ross sent me a few questions he was getting. I'm not sure how people think certain things that they do sometimes, because we do funerals every week at our church, at all of our locations. And so we do funerals all the time. Weddings are a little tougher because we do have Saturday night services. And so a lot of weddings want to have them on Saturdays, but we do Friday night weddings occasionally. More and more people are going other places for weddings. So our pastors actually do a lot of weddings at a lot of locations. Not necessarily all of them are at our church. But when it comes to funerals, sometimes a lot of people do them in funeral homes, obviously, but we do a lot of funerals at our different locations. And we have, like I said, 5 or 6 pastors at every location. And so especially if you're a volunteer or someone we know or anyone who attends that church, those are your pastors. Those are the people you will know. Those are the people you'll be in relationship with. That'll be your pastor that would do your funeral. And so,
does each location then handle the food itself? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. Before we get to that, I office just down from our care team that's centrally located, and they help the campus teams do this. But I believe that Greg told me just recently that it was about 175 weddings last year and about 90 funerals. And so that just kind of gives you the on-site, not the wedding number, but the funeral number. And the good part, I mean, we do some weddings still at our campuses, but to be honest with you, most kids today want to get married in a barn or a really fancy woods with the sun going through. So, but we still do those. To answer your question, food-wise, we do not do a lot of the food at our locations anymore, to my knowledge.
A lot of our places don't have kitchens. Yeah, sorry. A lot of our places don't have kitchens or availability to do that, and so a lot of times people will cater in some food. We'll do some limited things, but yeah, it looks different
Other
depending
questions?
on our location.
Hang on, Bunny.
So would you remove our kitchen?
I have no idea. I don't know. I know. I've done a tour with Brad. Believe me, I've seen every inch of this building. He knows everything. The guy is amazing.
How do you like our boiler room?
Yes. Oh,
it's awesome.
Dale used to crawl through those crawl things too. Yeah.
All right. Seriously,
Yeah.
other questions?
I
Otherwise,
honestly, I don't know. We literally haven't gotten to that point where we don't know what we would renovate, what we would change, what we wouldn't. I mean, that would be a whole process. Once again, every building's different. So we would have to see what we would need for some of our core things that we do, and if we didn't need that space, we might keep it, for example. But
We wouldn't go to the expense if we didn't need to.
right, yeah, that's true.
we like food here, by the way.
SLP still has their kitchen.
Yeah, Spring Lake Park still has their kitchen. Some of the others still have their kitchen. It just depends if we need the space or not. And
All right, Ross,
you
go ahead.
you have great space in some of that part of the building for sure. So.
Any last for tonight burning questions? I want to remind you again, 2 of these gentlemen are going to be with us Thursday along with Gary. You're going to like Gary. Gary's a woman.
Girl Gary.
Girl Gary.
Yep.
I said, "Hi, I'm Ross." And she said, "I'm Gary." And I said, "Gary?" And she said, "Yeah, like a guy." And we both laughed. And then about 3 minutes later, someone walked in and said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so." She says, "Hi, I'm Gary." And that person said, "Gary?" And she said, "Yeah, like a guy." And they both laughed. And I thought, I bet she's been doing that since middle school. A poor woman.
She's the smartest one out of all of us. So
She is.
You'll like
and,
her.
and I've met her twice. There's no doubt about it. Oh, no, love you like brothers. But do you feel as if you had the opportunity to ask sufficient questions tonight? All right. Gentlemen, last final comments before we send you on your way?
We probably have said this in some form or fashion, but I'll just say it again. Honestly, Eagle Brook doesn't go looking for this, just so you hear from our heart on this. It's one of those things where we want to be, just like you want to be, in the center of God's will and listening to His voice and being directed by Him. So know that we, again, don't go looking for this, but we're praying for you all as you journey through what's next. And we would welcome your prayers towards us as well. And so, but thank you for being here tonight and for the just 150 years of incredible ministry. Way to go. So thank you.
Yep, I have a lot of memories here. And like I say, this is where I came to faith. This is where I was baptized. And I recognize a lot of faces in the crowd. So it's good to see you again. But you're right. There are locations we're looking to go start in. And then there's every now and then God just comes and drops an opportunity. And so our heart is this one of those opportunities? And I think we're just wide open to whatever God might want to do.
Yeah, I've talked enough, but It's been fun just to get to know your board and see their heart in the few meetings we've had. I think we share the same heart, and it might look different, but isn't that cool that we're united as believers? We want the same thing, and it might look different, but that's our heart. So hopefully we were able to share who we are a little bit, and for you to get to know us. We're open to any questions you have as we go here. So thanks, Russ.
Thank these guys. All right, it is 8:35. I'm going to give you a 5-minute bio break. And at 8:40, if you want to come back and talk, we're going to do it. If you don't want to come back and talk, you can go home. But we're going to continue conversation at 8:40 for anyone who would like to. Thank you.